Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College at the City University of New York in Bayside, Queens. Our mission is to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate current and future generations about the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. The Kupferberg Holocaust Center in Bayside, New York is situated on the traditional land of the Mantinecock people who continue to live here today. We offer gratitude and respect to all of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island, past, present, and future, including the Lenape and Shinnecock peoples. What I just read is what we call a land acknowledgement. This is a statement recognizing that the land we all occupy in the course of our daily lives, including our schools, jobs, parks, and homes, as well as the names of towns and roads, was first inhabited by another group of people who were forcibly expelled and murdered. Today, we identify those crimes for what they are: mass atrocities and genocide. These horrors continue to have devastating political, social, psychological, economic, and environmental impacts upon and within Native American and Indigenous communities. Today's workshop, Just Like Me, Embracing Our Common Humanity with Self-Compassion, features Laura Banks, a certified compassion cultivation training instructor, who will discuss different strategies and practices for translating our healing from personal and collective trauma into positive action. This professional development workshop is part of the 2022-23 KHC and National Endowment for the Humanities Colloquium entitled Trauma, Remembrance, and Compassion, and it's co-sponsored by the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, CETL, at Queensborough Community College. The workshop's hosted in a meeting format, so you'll be able to interact with both Laura and each other using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. To kick things off, please join me in welcoming John Yee, one of this year's KHC NEH Faculty Fellows. John's a lecturer in the English department at Queensborough Community College and a doctoral student in English education at Teachers College at Columbia University. He teaches freshman composition, the accelerated program, and an introductory course on Asian American literature. His interest is on culturally responsive pedagogy and on fostering a collaborative teaching and learning environment, particularly in digital spaces. He has recently co-published an article in the Journal of the Assembly for Expanded Perspectives on Learning. John, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so thrilled and honored to be introducing Laura Banks. Here's her brief bio. Laura Banks is honored to be a certified compassion cultivation training instructor, dual certified by Compassion Institute and Stanford University Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, short for CCARE. While raising a family around the world, she has witnessed how meeting the challenges of life with compassion can greatly reduce suffering and transform the very things people thought would break them into the most resilient and beautiful parts of who they are. This powerful combination of training and personal experience shaped Laura's commitment to strengthen her own and others' capacity to thrive, especially through the cultivation of compassion. You can learn more about Laura and her work at www.laurabanks.com. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Laura Banks.
Good morning, everyone. It is really just such an honor to be back and to be with you. I am so grateful for this opportunity to talk about compassion and to be part of the series on trauma, memory, and compassion, or remembrance and compassion. So I want to start with a story, and this is from my personal life, and I'm going to actually just share my screen briefly. And let me pause even before I begin that to say that we will spend about 60 to 75 minutes together. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room. Obviously, if you need to go, feel free to take care of yourselves, whatever that looks like. But I just wanted to give that sort of as a sense. And my time will probably be like, I'll take maybe around 40, 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And then any time we have after that is a chance for you to ask questions, to let this be really engaged. If you have questions, we're a smaller group right now. But I think let's still just, if you want to put the questions in the chat, Marissa and John are going to be tracking that, and they will sort of manage a Q&A at the end. But if there's something really pressing on your mind, feel free to just sort of like put urgent. And maybe John or Marissa can just flag me because I won't be tracking the chat so carefully myself. And I also want to invite you, if you don't have a pen and paper handy or like a laptop or something that you can write on, if you want to grab something, You'll have opportunities to sort of sit and think and journal, or just reflect. And writing is a very powerful way to sort of consolidate our thoughts and our experiences, even if it's just a little bit. It also gives us something to come back to. And then the last thing I want to say before I begin is to invite you to take care of yourselves. All of us, one of the really tricky things about being human is that none of us get out of here with, none of us even get out of our mother's wombs without a fair amount of trauma. If we are alive and if we are breathing, it means that we've seen a lot of beauty, but we've also seen a lot of hard. And so just as you're listening and as you're going through this, if you feel like, whoa, that's kind of a lot for me, just ask yourself what would serve me right now? Do I need to just stand up, walk away, get a drink of water, take a deep breath, maybe come back to the recording another time? But the practice of actually paying attention to what's going on for you is a practice of compassion in and of itself. Just noticing, whew, okay, wow, given everything I'm carrying right now, this is a little heavy. Part of the other piece of compassion and self-compassion, and we'll talk about this later, is also recognizing when the compassionate thing to do would actually to lean in and to do the little bit heavier, harder thing. Compassion is both that capacity to say too much and the capacity to say, my inclination is to turn and run away right now, but what matters more to me is building some strength, building some capacity, or kind of being at that safe therapeutic edge for myself. But ultimately trust yourself in this meeting right now, but also in your life. You got the wisdom inside of you. You've got an embodied wisdom about what's best for you, and it's a powerful practice to start listening to that. So let me share my screen. This opportunity to let me shut this down for a second, hold on, to have a conversation about how connecting to our sense of common humanity or embracing our common humanity and what we share with others is a practice of self-compassion, how it can support us through difficult times, but also how support, turning to ourselves and our own needs and acknowledging that, puts us in a place to actually be able to connect with the humanity of others and support them when they're struggling or when they're suffering. That these our well-being and the well-being of those around us, even strangers, are really intimately and intricately connected. So this is a picture. It's a little bit dark. I hope you guys can see it, but this is a picture of my maternal grandparents, Emil and Ilmi Seppänen. They were both born in Finland, and my mother's Finnish. And this is just right in the middle of World War II. My grandfather was a soldier and a medic, and my grandmother was, here you can see them holding, I think this is their first child, their daughter Marjatta. And this is, my grandfather is home on leave, and they're taking a picture. But this is in the middle of World War II. And they were living at the time, my grandmother was from a part of Finland, on eastern Finland, called Karelia, which is now part of Russia. But it's traditionally Finnish, or the language is Finnish, the culture is related to Finland. But after World War II, it was annexed by Russia because they had won that territory in a war with Finland. And because Russia was an ally, they got to keep the land that they had conquested. But in this picture, just a few, not very much later, maybe 2 years later, my mother was born. And when my mother was still a baby, just like in this picture, her sister was young, there was an air raid. And my grandfather was fighting in the war, and my grandmother was home with her children alone. And there was an air raid, and they needed to leave. And they left home, and my grandmother assumed they'd be coming back because this had happened before during the war. There had been times when they'd had to leave their homes and come back in and out. But this time they never went back. They went and they stayed with her sister, who lived further into Finland. And they ended up staying there. My mother grew up as an internally displaced refugee. She was 9 years old when they finally had their own home. But I think about this I've thought about this story a lot over the course of my life because the impact of the war on my own family, on my mother, my grandfather was injured in the war. He was a disabled veteran. He struggled with alcoholism. As I mentioned, they were sort of displaced for almost a decade after the war. And that's shown up in my life in really, really big ways. That trauma, like it showed up in the ways that my family, like my mom, did an incredible job sort of shifting some of that away from us. But it was still a very much a lived experience for me. But also the beauty of their lives is, right? When I think about that moment, I think about the moment that for all that my grandmother knew, her world was ending. It didn't. Somehow she kept on living. Somehow she woke up the next morning and was hungry and got herself food, got her children food, found the resources she needed to make it through that next day, and then did it again the next day, and then again the next day, until she had lived a really beautiful life. And in the middle of all that displacement, she made a huge effort to find libraries and to listen to music and to tell stories and to create beautiful traditions for my mother. And so both things were true, both the trauma, but also the resilience and the beauty. And both of those things live in me the same way that they do for every human being. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And I'm going to invite you to think about something in your personal history or something in your your family history or your cultural history or your whatever, where something really difficult happened, something that you would never have chosen really for even your worst enemy necessarily to have gone through. But it happened because that's part of being human, is that difficult things happen and that you or your family survived. Because if you're here today, it meant that as much as that difficulty was there, so was that desire and that hunger to live. So was that willingness to wake up, to take care of themselves, to take care of the wounded people around them, to take care of the children, their own, others, orphans. We are all survivors. We are all descended from the people who chose to live. We would not be here if that part of humanity was not in us as much as the trauma. So I'll leave this sort of as a thought exercise. You can do this with your eyes open, closed. It doesn't have to be as big as my grandmother's story. It can be just, it's not a just. Everybody on this call survived a pandemic, right? That's huge. And that's something that in 100 years, people will be studying and trying to figure out, how did these professors teach online during the pandemic? How did they figure that out? And how did the students survive? And you guys we are that history living right now. So it can be, how did you make it through that first 2 months of the pandemic when literally everything that made sense to us flipped upside down? Or it can be, like I said, something historical, but it can be as big or as small as you want. But I invite you to remember, right? So this practice of remembrance, a trauma, big trauma, little trauma, difficulty, big or small, from your own life, from your family history or your cultural history. And how did you, your ancestors, your people survive? What did they do? What resources, either internal or external, did they draw on? Who were the people that supported them? What did they find in nature? Were there stories? Were there art? Were there rituals? What helped them choose to keep living? And what supported them in living? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just think about it. If you want, you can write about it a little bit, but see if you can connect into both the difficult part of the story, right? But also the survival part, the resilience part, the choosing to live part. And if you can hold both of those things sort of equally, I'll give you 2 minutes just to think about it or to sort of free write. So just coming back, you can keep writing a little bit if you want to, or jot down things you might want to come back to. But if you're ready, just putting down your pen or your pencil or a laptop. And if it's comfortable for you, just closing your eyes and just noticing what it feels like in your body to remember. It might be uncomfortable, it might be a mixed experience. But just like if you were looking at a tree outside without judgment, what does it feel like in your body to remember? Both the difficulty and also the courage, the help. And then see if you can bring your attention a little bit more to the help. Whatever it was, courage, an individual, a group, a doctor, time. And like you could turn up the volume on that. So for me in my story, my mother and her family, my grandmother, she went to go live with her sister who lived on a farm. And they didn't have a lot, but they made it work. So just really sort of expanding that and savoring the way in which help, tangible and intangible, helped you, your family, your community. And in your own mind, just expressing gratitude, perhaps imagining that you could say thank you to that person. And then taking in a deep breath, exhaling, opening your eyes if they were closed. I'm going to just share a quote with you from Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, or about Margaret Mead. Quote, years ago, the anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in a culture. The student expected Mead to talk about clay pots, tools for hunting, grinding stones, or religious artifacts. But no, Mead said that the first evidence of civilization was a 15,000-year-old fractured femur found in an archaeological site. A femur is the longest bone in the body, linking the hip to the knee, so it's that long thigh bone. And in societies without the benefits of modern medicine, it takes about 6 weeks of rest, complete rest, for a fractured femur to heal. This particular bone had been broken and had healed. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You cannot run from danger. You cannot drink or hunt for food. Wounded in this way, you are meat for your predators. No creature survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. You are eaten first. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that another person has taken time to stay with the fallen, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended them through recovery. A healed femur indicates that someone has helped a fellow human rather than abandoning them to save their own life. This capacity we have as human beings to take care of each other and to also look for help is what is essentially compassion. That is what it is in our bodies from like physiological, the research shows it. And I'll just point to it in a minute. But it's an innate capacity. It's something that we all have. We all need to ask for help at various points in our lives. And we all have opportunities to give help. And this practice of recognizing our own worthiness of receiving care when we need it, and our own capacity to give care when others need it, is this place where our self-compassion, our willingness to include ourselves in the circle and the lived experience of compassion touches our common humanity. We all will be people who need help, and we will all have opportunities and the capacity to share, give help. And this is how we survive. This is how we thrive. This is how we find meaning in our lives. And for every person you'll ever meet, they have this in them. You have this in you, because we are literally descended from people who chose to take care and to receive care from others. So I'm going to go back to this PowerPoint slide and just explain a little bit about compassion, what we understand. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to jump there. What we understand from the research. And this is coming out of now almost 2 decades of research using like functional MRIs and various tests, but to actually look at the physiology, like what's going on in the brain, what's going on in the vagus nerve, what's going on like on an epigenetic level in the context of compassion. And what and this is one way to define it. Like this is sort of, you might find variations on a theme, but when compassion is spoken about in the context of the neurobiology of compassion, like what compassion looks like in a human body, it basically, these are components. This is how it's defined, that it's an awareness of suffering that's coupled with care, like this sense of care, this matters to me, and a willingness to relieve that suffering. So in this practice we did right now, we sort of had, this is an opportunity to practice compassion like historically, like across time. We can have compassion in like immediate moments, and that's the way we most often experience it. Like we see somebody we care about, or even a stranger go in a difficult situation, and we feel moved to help them, right? Like we don't just sort of have an empathic response where we feel the suffering and we go into overwhelm. But compassion actually has this element of courage, this element of willingness to lean in and turn towards it and respond to the needs. But this, what we can also do, like in the context of compassion, and we can learn to practice, is to have an awareness of suffering across time, right? This practice of remembrance, this practice. So if suffering in the moment is like right now, trauma is sort of that those echoes of suffering, of profound suffering over time. We can bring our awareness to that trauma, to the ways in which historical or significant life events in our own lives still have sort of echoes and repercussions of that suffering, and can still create suffering for ourselves or for others. And that we can learn to remember that, learn to hold it in remembrance. And as we do, as we bring in this sense of compassion and care, it helps us. I mean, there's research that shows around post-traumatic growth and around the impact, particularly of self-compassion in healing trauma. But as we begin to hold that trauma and that remembrance with compassion, it begins to shift. Our experience of it begins to shift, and it really does begin to heal for us, and sort of even in some ways moving back in time. For example, when I think of my grandmother in that moment where she literally, my mom talks about this, felt like this is the end of the world as I know it. It was the end of the world as she knew it, but it wasn't the end of the world. She, and it was for other people, and that's not to make light of that, but she survived and her children survived. And she has grandchildren and great-grandchildren who live beautiful, complicated lives. So the world, her world, even though it felt like it was ending, didn't end in that moment. And as I think back on that experience, it has created in me a much stronger commitment to connect with her descendants and to really, in a sense, like to heal the trauma of that moment, even though I can't change what it was for her, but to really live the fact that the story didn't end there. To let my life be, in a sense, a resolution or like a healing of the trauma, and that I've chosen to live my, like that I'm where I'm living and other people are living because of her courage. So once again, going back to the neurobiology, there's a couple of key components of compassion. And one of them is this awareness of suffering in ourselves or a need in others. And that can be a cognitive, like we notice it, we think about it, or it can be an empathetic, which means like we're literally feeling it in our bodies. But that awareness of suffering or of trauma is an essential component of compassion. We can be kind to somebody and not know they're suffering, and that'll be kindness. But compassion always exists in the context of a human response to difficulty or suffering or trauma. The second is that not only do we sort of get caught in that, or do we have an awareness of the suffering or the trauma, but it touches us and it moves us, and we like it. We have an affective or an emotional response to it. It matters to us. And when those two things, that awareness and our concern or our sense of love, our sense of commitment, sort of touch each other, it's like almost like a chemical reaction. And that when we're able to hold both of those things, right, that awareness and that concern or the gratitude, that sense of connectedness to others, are it becomes transformed into a wish to change the situation, to respond to it, to have an intention. I want this to be better. I want to somehow heal this. Also, then accompanied by a wanting and a willingness to do something and the courage to do something to heal that suffering. And we'll go back to the components of like just looking at how this connects into self-compassion, or what does self-compassion look like? But I just want to name that compassion is an embodied experience. It's not like an intellectual exercise. Literally our whole body, not just our brain, comes online, like our vagus nerve, which is this cool nerve that runs from our brain all the way down into our belly and like innervates in all these ways. That's activated. And so it's an embodied experience, both in terms of our response, but also it's rooted in our own, like the reason we can feel compassion is because we know what it's like to be a human being, right? We know what it's like to be thirsty. We know what it's like to be hungry. We know what it's like to be cold, to be hot, to be far away from the people we love, to feel lonely, to be in physical pain, to be betrayed. Like these are just baked into the human experience. And when we experience those things and we that's just a part, and we don't turn away and we don't try to like make them all easy and nice or blame someone else, but we actually experience them. It makes us more capable of recognizing those experiences in other people. And then sort of starting to connect, oh, when I'm thirsty, a drink of water is really, really nice. And then someone, like, let's say somebody comes to our house, like they're knocking on doors for like a political candidate, and it's a really hot summer day, and we can see they're really hot. We can be like, oh, would you like a drink of water? Because we know what thirst feels like. We know what heat feels like. So our capacity to feel compassion for people really is baked into our ability to experience the hard and the good and the having needs and having those needs met. And so we can take that awareness, and from that awareness and recognizing the relief we feel when our needs are met, start connecting that to people around us in the world. The way that Pema Chodron, a really beautiful Tibetan nun, speaks about it, she says, quote, "When you touch your sorrow or fear, your anger or your jealousy, you are touching everybody's jealousy. You are knowing everybody's fear or sorrow." And this is true just from a neurobiological level. Like why we experience these things may look very different in terms of like the stimulus in our lives, the stimuli in our lives and our life experience. But hunger is hunger, thirst is thirst, fear is fear, loneliness is loneliness. Like how our body, like the biochemical response and neurobiology of that is the same for each of us. The same way that all human beings, if we're going to eat food or like the process of respiration and all that, it looks the same. These experiences are physiological experiences that are identical for all of us as a species. And so when we experience those, it's like we're tasting what it's like for anybody else to experience those. She continues, "You wake up in the middle of the night with an anxiety attack, and when you can fully experience the taste and smell of it, you are sharing the anxiety and fear of all humanity and all animals as well. Instead of your distress becoming all about you, it can become your link with everyone all over the world who is in the same predicament. The stories are different, the causes are different, but the experience is the same. For each of us, sorrow has exactly the same taste. And so it is with rage, jealousy, envy, and addictive craving. They all have exactly the same taste. It's true also with gratitude and kindness. There can be 2 zillion bowls of sugar, but they all have the same taste. She continues to say, it's unconditional compassion for ourselves that leads naturally to unconditional compassion for others. If we are willing to stand fully in our own shoes and never give up on ourselves, then we will be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others and never give up on them. True compassion does not come from wanting to help out those less fortunate than ourselves, but from realizing our kinship with all beings. Kristen Neff is one of the pioneers of self-compassion. She is probably the pioneer of self-compassion in the West. So the experience of self-compassion exists across time. The ability to be aware of our own suffering and to take care of those needs. It shows up in all wisdom traditions, all literature, all cultures, right? So it's not like a Western idea, but the study and the research around it, really, Kristen Neff is the pioneer. And she names 3 elements in her research of self-compassion. And these can kind of be in any order, but here's one way to think about them. The ideas themselves say the same, but it's not like a linear thing, right? Like a sequential, first you're this, then you're that. They can come in any different combination. But she says one of them is mindfulness or mindful awareness, right? So going back to that idea of an awareness in the practice of compassion, you've got to be aware of it, of what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And it's learning to pay attention to our moment-to-moment experiences without judging them. It's learning to just bring just non-judgmental awareness to, wow, this is what's going on for me right now, without trying to blame someone else or shame ourselves. To just be like, this is the experience that I have, and this is what it feels like for me. So just bringing that awareness. And so, for example, if it's, let's say somebody is having an anxiety attack, to just be like, oh, I'm having a very difficult time breathing and I'm, feeling constricted or whatever it shows up in their bodies, and to just notice it, to just bring awareness to it, bringing kind attention to our bodies. Our bodies experience it the same way as if we had a supportive person, just saying, hey, are you doing okay? So just bringing that kind attention to what is going on for me right now in this moment. Then another element is bringing kindness. That self-compassion adds the gentle touch of care when we are in pain. So, wow, this is really hard right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And, you're having a hard time right now, rather than once again, sort of piling on the shame or trying to lash out at someone else, just saying, right now, this is how I'm feeling. And, I need to go for a walk. I need to finish this paper right now. So I'm not going to be able to right now, I'm going to just push through because finishing this paper is actually the most important thing for me. But after I'm done, I'm going to go take a nap. I'm going to go for a run. Right. So it doesn't mean sort of once again, maybe we have to just say, I'm at my limit. I can't do more. But it might also be, I'm doing something hard that really matters to me. So I'm going to just keep doing it. And then I'm going to respect the fact that I need to take care of my body. I've sort of taken out a loan on my well-being, and I'm going to have to pay it back. And then the third element is our common humanity. Recognizing our common humanity, which then reminds us that we are not alone in our suffering, like that quote that I just read from Pema Chodron. Also, this sense that it's not our fault that we're suffering. It's not our fault when we get hurt. It's not our fault when our feelings are hurt, our body is hurt. Life is hard. It's also beautiful, but it is hard. And struggling is a part of the human experience. And so it doesn't make us, it's often a natural instinct for us as human beings to sort of feel ashamed when we're struggling. And so we begin to sort of isolate ourselves and feel like nobody understands me. The really amazing thing about this practice of self-compassion, and particularly connecting in to this element of common humanity, is that when we are struggling, it's an invitation to step into our full humanity rather than turning away. And it's an invitation to recognize that what we're going through, is a part of the human experience. And that it helps us understand what it means to be human, and that perhaps this experience can help us actually live more fully into our humanity. And I want to just share something in the context of, because this is hosted by the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, that there are people who have studied altruism and the courage of people who step in and help complete strangers, even putting themselves at risk. That is not essential for compassion. Compassion doesn't ask that. But one of the threads that comes through over and over and over again when you look at narratives of people who saved Jews during the Holocaust, or who in any other sort of extreme situations, you think about the Underground Railroad here in the United States and the history of slavery, when people chose to do really hard, brave things for strangers and putting their own lives and the lives of people they loved at risk for them, one of the common threads through all those stories is, I couldn't not do it. They were human just like me. It could have been my brother. It could have been my sister. It could have been my parent. It could have been me. I literally could not respond. So when we connect into our own lived experience, when we connect into what it means to be human, what it means to receive aid, and to really not just keep that for ourselves, but to begin to recognize that this is true for all of the people around us, it creates in us this courage and this capacity to respond to traumas big and small with courage. So I'm going to invite you to do just another short sort of experience practice around this idea of just like me. There's a lot of great resources out there in terms of training our common humanity in the context of compassion trainings and self-compassion. But I'm going to give you just a little taste of this right now. And so you can once again do this exercise with your eyes opened or closed. You can just do it as a listening exercise or even as a meditation. And it'll just be about 5 minutes. You can also just, if you want, write or doodle, sometimes whatever, you know what serves you best. So I'm going to invite you to think of 2 people in this practice. One is somebody that you love or that's easy for you to care for, and the other is a stranger. And I'll walk you through it. So if you'd like to, you can close your eyes or you can keep them open. And I invite you to just take in a deep breath and exhale, perhaps with a sigh, and just notice your breathing. You can put your hand on your belly or your heart, kind of just ground yourself in your body. Just feel your feet on the floor, your seat on the chair. And I invite you to bring to mind someone that is easy for you to love, someone that you care about. Could be somebody who's alive and part of your life right now, or somebody who was a part of your life at another time. Perhaps they've passed and moved on. But somebody, when you think about them, it just makes your heart want to sing. And imagine them being right here with you, sitting in front of you. And acknowledge that they are just simply human, just like you. And if you'd like, you can repeat these phrases in your mind while you think about them, or you can just listen. But this person was born into the world just like me. This person who I care about has a body and a mind just like me. This person has experienced suffering just like me. This person I care for has been sad, angry, or hurt just like me. This person is sometimes scared and worried just like me. This person wants to be loved and understood, just like me. This person I love wants to be seen and heard, just like me. This person wants to be safe and healthy, just like me. This person wants to belong, just like me. This person I care about wants to be happy, just like me. And just thinking about these phrases, holding this person you care about, we'll just take a moment to offer them our wishes for them to be well. And you can listen to the phrases I offer and repeat them in your own mind, like a blessing almost, or a prayer for them. Or you can substitute them for whatever words are resonant or natural for you. And imagine that you could say this to these phrases to this person directly. I wish for you to be free from pain and suffering. I wish for you to be safe from harm. I wish for you to be healthy and well. I wish for you to move through life with ease. I wish for you to be happy because you are a human being just like me. Just notice what it feels like in your body to connect to the experience of our common humanity and to wish well for a loved one. And then taking in another deep breath and exhaling, you can let that loved one sit at your side or let them move on in your imagination. And I invite you to bring someone to mind that you recognize, but you don't really know very well. This could be somebody who works in the same department as you, but you haven't really ever had a conversation with them, or somebody who lives in the same apartment building or neighborhood. Perhaps somebody who works at a local coffee shop that you get your coffee from. But, the bus driver, just somebody that you would recognize, but you don't know their story. You don't know really anything about them. And imagine that they were here, that you could see them, and that they were sitting right in front of you. And begin by just acknowledging that even if you don't know them, you do know that they're human, just simply human, just like you. And that this person you don't know was born into the world, just like me. And that this person has a body and mind, just like me. The stranger has experienced suffering, even if I don't know what it is. Everybody has, just like me. This person has been sad and angry, hurt, just like me. They're sometimes scared and worried, just like me. This person wants to be loved and understood, just like me. This person I don't know anything about them, but I can know that they want to be seen and heard, just like me. This person wants to be safe and healthy, just like me. This person wants to belong, just like me. And even if I don't know them or understand them or where they come from or their culture, I can know that this person too wants to be happy, just like me. Then, if it feels comfortable and safe, appropriate for you, offering them those same wishes that you did for your loved one. I wish for you too to be free from pain and suffering, even if I don't know you. I wish for you to be safe from harm. I wish for you to be healthy and well. I wish for you to move through life with ease. even if I don't know what it means, I do want you to be happy because you are a fellow human being, just like me. And so once again, just taking in a deep breath, exhaling, opening your eyes, yawning and stretching if that feels good. I'm going to give you just 2 minutes to reflect on that, to notice what it felt like in your body, in your mind, in your heart, to go through that exercise and to just jot down any similarities, differences, challenges. So I'll give you 2 minutes to reflect. Just finish wrapping up whatever you're writing. If you're writing that you want to come back to. I'm going to share 2 quotes and then just one more idea and a story, and then we'll wrap up and take some time for questions. The first quote is from physicist Carlo Rovelli. He's a modern day writer, just gorgeous, poetic, brilliant physicist. But in his book, 7 Brief Lessons on Physics, he says, quote, "We are made of the same stardust of which all things are made. And when we are immersed in suffering or when we are experiencing intense joy, we are being nothing other than what we can't help be, a part of our world." The second quote I want to share with you comes out of this phrase, or is related to this phrase, "never again." That often is quoted in the context of work around the Holocaust, like never again. We don't want this ever to happen again. It's used also in the context of other genocide and like things that happen that we're like, never again. Like we need to be committed to this never happening again. And I want to just point to the fact that never again requires memory. It requires remembrance. If we forget, if we refuse to remember because it's too hard, it's too bitter, it's too heavy, we can't stand as a witness. We can't create a world in which it never happens again. As difficult as remembrance and memory can be in the context of trauma, it is essential in our practice of compassion. It's as essential to our practice of compassion across time as developing the courage to stay present with the suffering in our own lives and the lives of other people. But this idea of never again, I also just want to say that like one of the things that's tricky about us as humans is there probably is no never again, right? Like compassion is only one response to suffering and to the difficulties of the world, and war and hatred and shame and divisiveness. Those are also human experiences. And so where does never again begin? It begins with us in this moment. The never again is right here with us, with ourselves and our own experience, with the person in front of us. That is where the never again begins. And that can, there's really great science around this that shows how that has an impact, a broader impact in the world around us. But there's a beautiful quote. This comes out of the Hebrew tradition. It's found in Exodus in the Torah. Exodus 23:9. And it ties into this idea, once again, of self-compassion and common humanity, right? So this goes way back thousands of years. And the quote, this is in the context of the Exodus of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. It says, quote, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt." So this ability for us to practice compassion towards others is rooted in the experiences we've had. And I think it's also just referencing that story is a gorgeous example of the way in which stories of trauma and resilience and survival inspire us across times. That story of the Exodus from the Jewish people was really, really important for the resistance of slavery here in the United States, right? Like even it shows up in some of the beautiful spirituals they sing, like "Go Down Moses," right? So like if you know what it's like to be a stranger, then don't oppress a stranger because you yourself know that, right? I want to just read you a story. And this comes out from I'm trying to think, there's two stories. I'm going to read this story. This is actually, I know people have to leave because we're on the hour. I was told that it could be 75 minutes long. So if you need to leave, leave. And maybe the recording will be available later. Actually, I know it will be because I've seen the other ones. And if you'd like to, you can come back. But thank you to all those who've been here. So this is a story from a man named Ariel Berger. He is a professor at Boston University, I believe, and he worked a lot with Elie Wiesel before Elie Wiesel's death, and recently wrote a book called Bearing Witness about working with Elie Wiesel. But he tells this story in an interview with Krista Tippett on the podcast On Being. It's called Be a Blessing, and it's from a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but this is a story he tells from his own life. It's a story about his son, his young son, who traveled to Israel. And one of his son's friends, they were on a group trip, and he disappeared for a few days. And when he came back, he asked his best friend, like, "Hey, where were you?" And this is the story that his friend told. He said, quote, "My grandparents were survivors. They were married 3 weeks before the deportation to Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz, they were separated, obviously. And he would go every evening to the fence separating the men and women's sides of the camps to bring her a crust of bread or an extra potato if he could, or even just to see her. Until my grandmother," his friend continued, "was transferred to a rabbit farm on the outskirts of Auschwitz. The Nazis were doing experiments on rabbits that had to do with finding a cure for typhus. And the rabbit farm was run by a Polish man who noticed pretty early on that the rabbits were getting better quality food and attention and care than the Jewish slave laborers. So he started to sneak food in for the Jewish slave laborers and the inmates. And then," Mason told my son, "my grandmother cut her arm on a piece of barbed wire, and the cut became infected. It wasn't a serious infection if you had antibiotics. But of course, if you were a Jew in that place, in that time, there was no way you were going to get antibiotics. So what did this Polish man who was running the rabbit farm do? He cut his own arm open and placed his wound on her wound so that he would get the infection that she had, and he became infected. And he went to the Nazis and he said, 'Hey, I'm one of your best managers. This rabbit farm is very productive. If I die, you're going to lose a lot of productivity. I need medicine.' They gave him medicine and he shared it with her, and he saved her life." So Mason said to my son, he said, "Where was I when I left the other day and I disappeared? I went to see that Polish man. He's still alive and living on the outskirts of Warsaw. And I went to say thank you. Thank you for my life. Thank you for my life." So Ariel Berger continues, "My son told me this story this year, and it raises a lot of questions. What does it take to be the kind of person who will share someone's wound, in spite of all of the pressure to see them less valuable than a rabbit? What does it take to push against all that pressure and to do the right thing with courage and moral clarity, and to see another person as a person when everything around you is telling you not to?" Rachel Naomi Remen, who's a beautiful writer, says this, and I'll close with this quote: "We are all healers of the world. It's not about healing the world by making a huge difference. It's about healing the world that touches you, that is around you." Just wonder about that a little bit. What if you were exactly what's needed? What then? How would you live if you were exactly what was needed to heal the world? I think these questions are very important questions. So as we wrap up our time together, I invite you to just take a minute and to reflect on, what did you discover? Or what did you learn? Did something catch your attention in this? Something you hadn't thought about before, or something that you knew but that resonated with you again? Something that might have challenged you? What did you discover? And what did you learn? And perhaps most importantly of all, what will you do? Either to take care of yourself and to recognize that the taking care of yourself is how you learn to take care of others, or in taking care of others around you. What will you do? And if possible, naming one, I can actually do that. That is something I can do. Something small. Where the world touches you. What can you do to bring healing there? So I'll just be quiet for a minute and then we'll go over to Q&A.
We could definitely start with any questions that anyone may have, or anything that maybe you'd like to share. And I thank Laura again for joining us. I know she's returning after working with us several times, and I'd be remiss to leave this out, but I think as we come full circle with this colloquium series, I'm so grateful that we can kind of be steeped into thinking about our own humanity and our own compassion, right? I think that I'm definitely learning a lot more about my self-compassion, right? And how I can better witness that and better practice that. So I really thank you, Laura, for your teaching, for leading us today.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you for inviting me back. It's just, I'm so honored. I feel super humbled when I think about the work that you each are doing and that the Holocaust Center is doing. So I know people had to leave. I might have also chased them away. I was almost like, oh, darn. But we're a small enough group. John, I'll let you lead the Q&A, but either read things that are in the chat or people are welcome to unmute, however you'd like to go for it.
I mean, we live so many chaotic lives, and we just have so much on our plate. And for those of us who are here today who maybe want to instill this practice in each and every day of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips or tricks that maybe work for you, and maybe things that you find that are important to maybe revisit time and time again?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that, John. That's a great question. So yes, one, compassion is an innate capacity, but it's also a skill that we can train. And self-compassion is also a skill that we can train. The same way that you can learn a foreign language, or you can learn an instrument, or maybe, just anything that we practice, we actually get better at, and it becomes sort of our more natural default state. So there are things if people wanted to learn more, just Google self-compassion meditation, Kristen Neff. You'll find a lot of books, resources that you can learn about. Sometimes just reading about it sort of gives you more hooks in your own life. But from just a couple of really small tidbit things, like you're really busy, you're not going to be listening to anything. You're not going to go sit and meditate. Probably the most powerful practice for me, one of the most powerful practices from my compassion training and teaching, is this phrase, just like me. Is that when I'm walking down the street and I see people, I literally am just thinking, oh, just like me, just thinking about, oh, I wonder what they're going to have for dinner tonight. Or, wow, I noticed that they're limping. I wonder if they're injured. But not from a place of judgment, but from just this place of sort of literally seeing the wonder, if you were walking through this beautiful, you're walking through the redwood forest and you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, to recognize that we literally, as we're walking around the world, there's just beautiful people. And so to cultivate that sense of curiosity and that sense of just like me, really begins to shift the way that I can be sitting for 15 minutes waiting for the next tube at the underground station, and I don't really get bored. I mean, sometimes I do, but every person becomes an opportunity for me to just wish them well and be like, I hope you have a good day, even though I'm not saying it. And so that is a really simple way, just like me, to walk through the world. The other part of common humanity that we didn't talk about I didn't talk about in this workshop that's a really important one is recognizing our interconnectedness. Like that my life depends on the contributions, like in a really beautiful way, of people I know, people I don't know, probably even my enemies, right? Like that my well-being is dependent on other people in ways that I'll never really fully understand. And that likewise, I'm a part of that web of goodness. And so to just, when I'm out in the world, to be like, when for example, I'm eating breakfast, I think about like, who grew the blueberries in my yogurt? Oh, I hope they're having a good day, right? So literally to just be looking for that interconnectedness, be identifying it, naming it. Loneliness is an epidemic at this moment of history, and practicing just like me and thinking about our interconnectedness. There's some pretty good research that shows it's a really powerful antidote to loneliness and also to anxiety, because sometimes our anxiety comes from a place of feeling like we're not going to be able to, like the world is a bad, terrible place full of dangers. And so just like me and practicing interconnectedness is a powerful tool. Also looking for moments of goodwill, right? Like looking for kindnesses. When I see a parent pushing a child in a stroller, I'm just like, oh my goodness, you are feeding that little human being. You are changing diapers. You are waking up with them in the night. You got them dressed. Look, they got little cute barrettes in their hair. Like, to actually have eyes to see the amount of love and care that exists in the world. We don't practice seeing it. So it's almost like we're tone deaf, that we have this beautiful music playing around us all the time, but we're tone deaf. And so looking for those micro moments, like looking for where you see goodness in the world and claiming it. And once again, you don't have to say it to somebody else, but just celebrating it. And seeing our fundamental goodwill, like in a moment where we feel like everybody hates each other and they're all polarized and attacking each other. The next time you're sitting at a red light, just think about every single person has agreed to be safe, has agreed to these rules about who gets to move, who doesn't. When you are waiting to get on the subway and people are like waiting for the people to come off before you get in, we're taking care of each other. Like, and so that's one, like those are some ways that I think really nurture our well-being. It's a practice of self-compassion because like it literally makes us healthier, but it's also a way of connecting to our common humanity. The one specific self-compassion thing that I try to practice is to notice when I'm taking care of myself and to appreciate it. Once again, like, when I eat, to just like recognize that as an act of self-care, to look at the ways in which I am already across my day taking care of myself, and then noticing when I'm asking more from my body and my brain than I actually have to give, and to recognize, okay, is this what I need to do right now? Because that's what my life is demanding from me. Okay, I can do it, but it's sort of like using a credit card and I'm going to have to pay it back with interest. Or do I need to do like sort of a time budget and say, you know what, actually, I don't, as a human being, have more than this amount of time in my day. And this really takes this much time. So I'm going to have to make hard choices about what I'm doing. And I see that as a really fundamental practice of self-compassion. It's a really hard one because we live in a productivity-driven society. And that's how we feed ourselves and the people we care about. But to just maybe try to, in small ways, be part of the shift of our culture to valuing well-being more than like, extraction mentality. Like if the earth can have a global climate crisis because we're taking more resources than the earth has for us to give it, guess what? We're part of the earth. And when we take more resources from these physical bodies, we are going to have a climate, like a global warming of our own physical and mental and relational lives. And to not feel like we're failing for that, that's literally because we're mortal and we only have so many resources. That was a lot. You asked for a few, and I think I give about 25. I apologize.
No, like I love all those tips, and I love that mantra, just like me. And kind of like you've touched on a few of those things in terms of like sustaining yourself in the profession. And I know Marissa has a question for you in terms of like, could you tell us more a little bit about the institute that you work at, and maybe the reason why people always keep coming to these events and the feedback that they give you.
Uh-huh.
Doing so, how do you sustain your work? What sort of allows you to maybe revise, recharge, and sort of work uh, with so many folks and groups?
Yeah, so that's a great question. First, I just I love this work. Like this is for me like the equivalent of like probably Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello, right? Like, some people would be like, I hate public speaking. Totally legitimate. I am like, give me a place to talk about compassion. And this is the equivalent of like a kid playing with Play-Doh or like eating ice cream. So the process, like the sharing and the engaging with people is really deeply rewarding for me. I will say though that I have learned that there have been multiple opportunities for me to scale up and to do more. And every time I do, it's like I pull an emotional hamstring and I'm like, nope, I am a small girl. I am not the McDonald's of compassion. I am like your local mom and pop shop that that maybe shows up on TripAdvisor and people go to get the cinnamon rolls from. But like the way I sustain myself is to recognize that I don't need to grow and get bigger to do meaningful work. Like I can stay small, I can stay engaged with communities and organizations that are doing work that is meaningful to me, and that it's enough. Like as long as I'm meeting my, I'm partnered, and so I'm in a lucky place to not have to pay all of the bills myself. But that's been an essential thing for me, is to recognize that in a moment of time where things are valued for their ability to scale up, I don't want to. And so I love this work, and I love when it's small and intimate and engaging with organizations that are meaningful to me, which means not very many people will ever know me, and I'm okay with that.
And
Does that
like,
help?
yeah, of course. And then the specific feedback that you get with so many folks, and I'm assuming very like different organizations. Could you speak a little bit about that, and how that either shapes how you either think about or like rethink about the work going forward?
Absolutely. So part of the reason this work brings me joy is, I'm sure there are people who take workshops or classes with me and are like, oh, okay, whatever. But for many, many people, I should say, in every time I teach, I get feedback that there's a story, there's a practice, there was a quote, there was a personal insight, there was a conversation with another participant that was super significant for an individual. What I love about this work, and the more I teach it, when I first started studying and teaching compassion, I was thinking of it sort of like yoga, like, okay, let me teach these poses to people, right? Like that will help you be stronger and more flexible, but that are sort of external coming in at you. The longer I teach compassion, I realize, no, actually, I'm not. These are really deeply innate skills, and they're going to look very individualized. They're going to be culture specific, individual specific. And so I'll offer, like, oh, here, try this tool just like me. But also, the more I teach, the more I'm really trying to point people to their own cultural, personal, family experience, because like to sort of help them tap into that and wake that up more than feel like it's another thing I need to be doing. And so that's one way that teaching has definitely shifted for me. I've also found that that it's stories, it's art, and it's connection or communicate, like people having conversations with each other, or that time to just think for a couple minutes, that those are the juicy points. And so the science is interesting and it supports it, but it's sort of secondary to the actual experience. That as human beings, we learn much, much more from experiential So meditation, exercises, reflections, and then through the arts. So quotes, stories, music, movement. So those are ways in which my own teaching is shifting. I'm particularly at this moment really interested in how the arts and what's called neuro arts. So like, how do the arts land in us as human beings? The ways, like, people have been looking at meditation for the last 20, 30 years, which I think is fabulous. But the reality is that most people aren't probably going to sit down to meditate, but most people have a favorite Spotify list they're listening to. And so how can we tap into the places that we are already doing it and help people to recognize, okay, why does this music speak to me? And how's this music helping me to take care of myself, to see the humanity of others, does that make sense? Because I think, what are the shows I'm streaming? What are this? Like, you want to look at pretty much every ridiculous blockbuster. It's like, it comes down to the story of, don't leave me alone and I'll show up and take care of you when all hell breaks out, right? That is all we've ever wanted to know as human beings is, am I going to be alone when hell hits? That's all we want to know. We want to know, am I going to be alone and how can I stay with the people I love? And for me, that's ultimately what compassion training is. How can we stay with ourselves and how can we stay with others through difficult things? Because when we do, we get to taste the joy. Like the harvest of compassion is joy. And like, you can have sort of fluffy, ephemeral happiness without compassion, but you don't get to joy without like sticking through the suffering, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for that. Laura, I'd like to open up if others have a question or maybe a comment, anything at all you'd like to say. Please, like, go ahead, because I think we're a small group, right? So
yeah, we're super small.
Unmute ourselves. And just a quick shout out to Professor Ridinger Donovan, who's one of the faculty cohort members for the NEH series this year.
Hi. Thank you, John. I don't have any questions, but I probably do, but I won't unpack all of them. Thank you, Laura, for that. Every time I'm with you, I learn something new. It's just always so wonderful and so fantastic to be able to sit with you today and learn more from you.
Oh, thank you. It's really just when I saw your name, for those who I don't know, I'm sure if I had a chance to spend time with you, I'd feel the same way, but I have had a chance to speak with and work with Marissa and Angela and John. Oh, I was really honored to see you here. Thank you. And can I share a thought with you, Angela? Or I should probably call you by your professional name. So I've thought a lot about the work that you do. I hope you don't mind me mentioning this.
No, not at all.
And if I get it wrong, please correct me. But if I remember right, you work with people who have disabilities, and is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I don't remember what the specific comment was, but in one of the workshops or classes that we've had, you were talking about your work, and it has stayed with me because I've thought about. In fact, it had a huge influence going back to John's question about like, how does teaching, how has teaching people influenced me? And this is true for each of you, but I want to just name this. I remember you talking about, like, for example, in the context of the Holocaust, how people with disabilities were, treated or viewed. And that conversation and your insights have shifted my understanding of self-compassion, because I realized that it's our capacity to stay with the parts of us that are differently abled and less able, and to value those in ourselves, that creates in us the capacity to see the beauty and value individuals who may be differently abled in our society. And it was an insight that I'd never had. And it's brought such a powerful depth to my own practice of self-compassion, to the places where I just go, I can't do that. Everybody else around me is doing that, but I can't. And rather than feeling it as a sense of shame, feeling it as just honoring that part of me that lacks that ability. So just a deep bow to the work you're doing, because it has landed in my life in a really powerful way.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree with Angela's sentiments because I do feel like I always learn something new. I always hear a new story, a new tidbit. And it's really funny that before, I guess right around when we started, I'm in at the KHC today, and a bunch of people from facilities came in, and I was like, wait, until I could step away to talk to them. And I'm not sure what exactly they were doing, but one of the people that was with them was very attracted to our exhibition that's up right now on the Nazi concentration camps, and was asking me some questions. And we were talking a little bit about the space because he was from facilities, so he was looking at just like the physical design of the building and our open ceilings and our unfinished floors and things like that. And we were having this interesting discussion very briefly about the space, and we were talking about what it's like to visit memorial sites and concentration camps that have become memorials. And he was sharing with me about once that his family members had visited. And I referenced you, Laura, because I was like, we're actually hosting this workshop right now. And I said how I had never been to a camp personally, but that you had shared a story in another workshop about the time that you visited Auschwitz that I think about very much. And I told him that, and we had this moment. I mean, I can retell it or you could, but just about like entering the physical space and how you were reluctant, right? You were with a group of people going through, and you didn't want to go through it, but then you thought about how so many people did not have the choice of not entering that space. And so that compelled you to kind of overcome the feelings that you were having. And I think about that. And I told him that, and he was very reflective on it, which was interesting. So, the words that you say, that we remember them constantly.
It's funny you say that, Marissa. When I was there with my classes the other day and you were showing us the piece of rubble from Auschwitz, that I thought about Laura's story in exactly that moment. That also, had such a profound impact on me when you shared that.
Yeah. So we, as part of our exhibit, that we have a piece of rubble of concrete that we know is from the Auschwitz Memorial Site, and that we think may have been part of a crematorium structure. We're not exactly sure, and it's on display. And we, there's only a select number of artifacts that are part of this display. There's a lot of historic images and things, but I always find that really profound because there's a saying that I have here where our space has no memory for the things that we're talking about because it didn't happen here, but how this is just like this tangible example and how it looks like nothing, but that it might have been part of a structure that was the last piece that thousands of people walk through. And I feel like students always are they look at it when I bring their attention to it, but then they look at it totally differently afterwards. And it's a very kind of solemn thing. So I should hear your story more when I talk to students about that.
Oh, thank you. And it gives me, it's a powerful thing to think of physical, that stone, that concrete, right? Like, I think about this when there have been times in my life where I've been going through something hard, and I will just, I'll be on a walk and I'll see a tree and I'll literally just put my hand on it and be like, you're going to be here after I've made it through this, or I haven't made it through this. And you've seen things, people go through hard things. And there's something really powerful about the fact that not only do we bear witness, as people in the stories we tell, but to know that the earth herself and the elements around us and the walls, that there's witness there, right? And that we can, once again, the compassion, we're not alone across time, right? That we can, in a sense, there's a beautiful story from the Buddhist tradition where the Buddha's being attacked by this character called Mara, and being told all the reasons that he's not worthy of enlightenment. And the Buddha touches the earth and just asks the earth to bear witness. And I think that that's a really powerful thing, particularly going back to self-compassion and common humanity, when we feel really alone, is to recognize that maybe that when we see that, when students or you or Angela or John or whoever brings students into that space, And they're seeing that in a sense, it's like, we time travel through that. And it's almost as if we could be present and bearing witness. And that then those people also who were dying could know that their story wasn't going to end with them, right?
Mhm.
Like that they, even in that moment, in some ways, they were not alone. And I think about that also tying it back to my grandmother's story. It's through my practice of compassion, her story and her life has become more meaningful to me because I think about the fact that, literally she thought that she and her kids were going to die. And they didn't in that moment. And they didn't the next day. And they didn't the next month. And they didn't the next year. And they didn't the next decade. And the trauma played out in very difficult ways. Like my grandfather died from alcoholism. My aunt and my uncle died from alcoholism. My mother didn't because she just made a decision not to drink. Like she was like, okay, I see how this is, so that was a moment. And that because of the decision she made, she literally pivoted like, a family's history to where she had 5 children. She had I have a lot of siblings, and that we've all had children, and like, we're complicated people, but we're beautiful people. And that I think about like, if, I imagine sort of being in that moment with my grandmother and being like, it's going to be okay. And when I'm like in my hell moment where I'm like, I don't know if I can survive this, I'm like, okay, whoever's after me, whether or not it's children or a complete stranger, you can just come and tell me I'm going to be okay right now. Like to kind of draw, going back to self-compassion practices, or to be like, hey, 65-year-old Laura, come and just remind me that 52-year-old Laura is going to get through this. Or if not, that the sun's going to shine at least the next day, right? Like that there are bigger forces at work than my life. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you guys. I feel really honored by that.
Well, I think to kind of
We're up.
to close this, I want to say something funny. So on I have a big monitor on my computer in the office, and periodically from different workshops and things I've attended, I've put different Post-it notes of things that people have said. And I just added a new one today from something you said. And that was that there is beautiful music playing all around us. And I think that that's such a really good message. So I'm going to make certain to listen for that music more when I am inundated with everything else. So on behalf of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, thank you all for joining us today, and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.